Captain Hyunwoo stared at the strange ship floating in the darkness of space. His crew had found it drifting near the edge of the galaxy where few ships ever traveled. The vessel looked ancient, covered in metal that seemed to shift and change, when nobody was looking directly at it. "Sir, we're getting strange readings from inside," said his second officer, pointing at the glowing screen. "There's someone alive in there." Hyunwoo felt his heart beat faster. Ships this old didn't usually have living people aboard. Most became tombs floating through the void, carrying only bones and memories of forgotten worlds. They brought the ship into their cargo bay with careful movements. The airlock hissed as it opened, and a wave of cold air rushed out. Inside, everything was covered in a thin layer of frost. The walls glowed with soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. At the center of the ship, they found her. The woman lay in a glass container filled with glowing liquid. Tubes connected to her arms, and her chest rose and fell in slow, peaceful breaths. Her black hair floated around her face like seaweed in a gentle current. She looked young, maybe 30 years old, but something about her felt ancient. "The container says her name is Sora," whispered Dr. Min-soo, the ship's medical officer. "But look at these readings. Her body temperature is far below freezing, yet she's alive. Her brain shows activity I've never seen before." Hyunwoo studied the sleeping woman's face. There was something familiar about her features, though he couldn't place what. "Can we wake her up safely?" "I think so. The machine seems designed to bring her back slowly." They worked for hours, carefully raising her body temperature and removing the tubes. When Sora's eyes finally opened, they were the deep brown of rich earth. She looked around the room with confusion, then sudden fear. "How long?" she whispered, her voice rough from sleep. "How long has the Guardian been sleeping?" "Guardian?" Hyunwoo knelt beside her. "What Guardian?" Sora tried to sit up, her hands shaking. "The stars. They're too quiet. Where are the warning signals? Where are the watchers?" She grabbed Hyunwoo's arm with surprising strength. "You have to tell me. How many years has it been since Earth went dark?" "Earth?" Dr. Min-soo stepped forward. "Earth is just a legend, a story about the first world of humanity lost thousands of years ago." Sora's face went pale. "Thousands? No, that's impossible. We were only supposed to sleep for a few hundred years at most." She looked around the room with growing panic. "The protocol! Something must have gone wrong with the Terran Protector Protocol." News of the awakened human spread quickly through the galaxy. Within days, ships from every major world were heading toward Hyunwoo's location. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting on the capital world of Nova Prime. High Chancellor Tae-min studied the reports with growing concern. He was one of the few people in the galaxy who carried human blood in his veins, descended from colonists who had left Earth before it vanished. Most people thought humans were extinct, just another failed species among thousands. "She claims to be from Earth itself," he said to the assembled council members. "Not from one of the lost colonies, but from the original homeworld." The council chamber buzzed with nervous conversation. Representatives from dozens of species whispered among themselves, their fears growing with each new detail. Dr. Ji-hai, the council's best scientist who studied ancient ruins, stood up to address the room. "I've been researching old records since we heard about this woman. The stories about Earth aren't completely wrong, but they're not complete either." She activated a holographic display showing the Sol system. Earth didn't just disappear. It hid. 10,000 years ago, something created a barrier around the entire solar system. We've always assumed it was empty space, but our sensors have never been able to see through that barrier. "What kind of barrier?" asked Chancellor Tae-min. "Something that bends space itself. It makes the solar system invisible and unreachable. But yesterday, our deep space monitors detected something new." The hologram changed, showing waves of energy rippling outward from where Earth should be. The barrier is failing. Sora sat in a medical room on Nova Prime, staring out at the stars through a small window. Everything felt wrong. The constellations were different, moved by the slow dance of 10,000 years. Entire star systems had been born and died while she slept. When Dr. Jihai came to visit her, Sora could barely speak. "We were supposed to protect everyone," she whispered. "That was the whole point of the protocol. Humanity was supposed to stand guard while the galaxy grew and learned." "Guard against what?" Jihai asked gently. "The Devourers." Sora's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "They come from the space between realities. Every 50,000 years or so they wake up and consume everything they can find. Not just planets or stars, but the very idea of existence itself." Jihai felt cold fear creep up her spine. "That's impossible." "We found records of their last visit in ruins on dead worlds. Entire civilizations wiped out so completely that even their names were forgotten. The only reason we knew they existed was because of strange gaps in time itself, places where something should have been but wasn't." Sora stood up and walked to the window. "My people calculated when they would return. We had maybe 1,000 years to prepare. So, we created the Guardians." "What are Guardians?" "Volunteers who gave up everything to become living weapons. They let scientists change their bodies and minds until they were no longer human, but something that could fight. Things from outside reality itself." Sora pressed her hand against the glass. "I was supposed to wake up after a few hundred years and check on their progress, but if 10,000 years have passed..." She turned to face Jihai, and for a moment her eyes seemed to glow with inner light. "Either the Guardians are dead, or they've become something we never intended. And now the barrier around Earth is failing, which means something is waking up." That night, emergency signals began arriving from the outer rim of the galaxy. Deep space monitoring stations reported impossible readings. Something massive was moving in the void between galaxies, heading toward populated space. On Earth, buried beneath miles of transformed rock and metal, the first Guardian began to stir. Kang Min had been sleeping for 10,000 years. His body and mind changed beyond recognition. But somewhere in the depths of his transformed consciousness, an ancient alarm was finally ringing. The protectors of humanity were awakening, and the galaxy would never be the same. Captain Deho had seen many strange things in his 40 years of flying cargo ships across the galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for what he witnessed at the Kilos system. He was delivering supplies to the mining colonies when his ship's sensors started screaming warnings. Where the star should have been, there was only darkness. Not the normal black of empty space, but something that hurt to look at directly. "Captain," his navigator whispered, "the star is gone. Not exploded, not collapsed into a black hole, just gone." Deho stared at the impossible sight. 5 planets had orbited Kilos, home to millions of people. Mining stations had floated in the asteroid belt, harvesting rare metals. Now there was nothing but a hole in reality itself, as if someone had cut a piece out of the universe. "Get us out of here," he ordered. But even as they turned away, he could see the darkness spreading. It moved like spilled ink, flowing toward the next star system. Whatever it touched simply stopped existing. Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Xerion cluster went dark overnight. The busy trade routes through the Malian sector simply ended, with ships arriving to find empty space where thriving worlds had been just days before. Fleet Admiral Bo-Ra stood in the command center of the Galactic Defense Headquarters, watching red warning lights flash across the star map. Each light that went out represented billions of lives lost. "How many systems?" she asked her aide. 17 confirmed, Admiral. But the reports are coming, in faster than we can process them. Bo-Ra was a veteran of 3 galactic wars, but she had never faced anything like this. What do our scouts tell us about the enemy? That's the problem, ma'am. The few ships that got close enough to see anything report the same thing. There's no enemy to fight. Just nothing. Reality itself seems to be unraveling. On Nova Prime, Sora sat with Dr. Jihai and Chancellor Taemin, watching the horrible news reports. Each lost system felt like a personal failure to her. The Devourers have returned, she said quietly. They don't destroy things the way normal beings understand. Destruction. They remove the very concept of existence from whatever they touch. How do we fight something like that? Taemin asked. You don't. Regular weapons, regular ships, regular armies are useless against them. They exist partially outside our reality, so normal physics don't apply. Sora stood up and walked to the window. That's why humanity created the Guardians. As if responding to her words, something strange began happening to the human technology around her. The lights in the room flickered and changed color. The computer screens showed symbols that hadn't been seen for 10,000 years. Even her simple clothes seemed to shimmer with inner energy. What's happening to you? Jihai asked in wonder. The awakening process is accelerating. The closer the Devourers get, the more my old nature returns. Sora held up her hand, and the air around it rippled like water. I was never fully human even before the long sleep. I was one of the first test subjects for the Guardian program. Dr. Jihai ran sensor scans on Sora and gasped at the results. Your cellular structure is changing. Your brain activity is increasing beyond anything I've ever measured. You're becoming something else, not something else. Something I always was, just sleeping. Sora closed her eyes, and for a moment her entire body seemed to become translucent. I can feel them out there, the Devourers. They're not just consuming space and matter, they're eating memory itself, removing entire civilizations from history. Meanwhile, Admiral Bo-Ra was learning the same horrible truth firsthand. She had sent the Third Fleet to engage what appeared to be a Devourer advance force near the Centauri system. 50,000 ships. The pride of the Galactic Defense Force. The fleet simply vanished. Not destroyed, not scattered, but gone as if they had never existed. The only evidence they had ever been there was Admiral Bo-Ra's memories and the empty berths in the shipyards where they had been built. Send word to all civilian populations, she ordered with a heavy heart. Full evacuation of the Outer Rim territories. Everyone falls back to the core worlds. But even as the evacuation began, the horrible truth became clear. The Devourers were faster than any ship, spreading through space like a plague of non-existence. Refugee fleets would arrive at their destination only to find the worlds they had fled to were already gone. On a small research station orbiting a dying star, Dr. Wu Jung made a discovery that changed everything. She had been studying ancient human artifacts, trying to understand their technology. When news of the Devourers reached her station, something amazing happened. The artifacts activated themselves. The power readings are incredible, she reported, to headquarters. These devices, they're not just tools. They're alive somehow, responding to the threat. One artifact, a simple metal cylinder, projected a holographic message. The image showed a human woman with kind eyes and a sad smile. If you are seeing this message, the Devourers have returned, the image said. I am Dr. Hai Wan, and I helped create the Guardian Protocol. What you hold is a seed, one of thousands we scattered across the galaxy before Earth went into hiding. Dr. Wu Jung watched in amazement as the hologram continued. These seeds will activate human technology wherever they are found. Ships, weapons, tools that have been dormant for millennia will awaken. But be warned, they were designed for one purpose only, to fight beings that exist beyond normal reality. Across the galaxy, similar awakenings were happening. Old human colonies that had been silent for thousands of years suddenly began broadcasting. Derelict ships drifting in forgotten corners of space powered up and began moving with purpose. Ancient orbital platforms around long-dead worlds came online, their weapons charging for battles that were millennia overdue. Sora felt each awakening like a distant heartbeat. "It's beginning," she told Taemin. "The network is coming online. Every piece of human technology in the galaxy is connecting to the same purpose." What purpose? To fight the darkness that eats reality itself. But the awakening came with a terrible price. As human technology activated, space around it began to change. Stars flickered as reality adjusted to accommodate forces that had been sleeping for 10,000 years. Some regions of space became dangerous to navigate, filled with energy that existed in dimensions normal sensors couldn't detect. Captain Dae-ho experienced this firsthand when he tried to dock at an old human trading post that had suddenly come back to life. His ship's systems went haywire as soon as he got close. "The station is broadcasting on frequencies that don't exist," his engineer reported, confusion clear in her voice. "The docking bay is trying to connect to ports our ship doesn't have." Through his view screen, Dae-ho could see the station transforming. Metal flowed like liquid, reshaping itself into patterns that hurt to look at directly. The lights weren't normal light anymore, but something that seemed to shine from inside his own eyes. "Get us away from here," he ordered. But his ship was already changing too. The hull began to shimmer and the engine room filled with a low humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. On Nova Prime, Chancellor Taemin called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Representatives from every major species gathered to discuss the growing crisis. "We face two impossible choices," he announced to the assembled delegates. "Allow the devourers to consume everything or accept help from humans whose technology we don't understand and can't control." "The human artifacts are changing everything they touch," protested the Altarian ambassador. "Ships, space stations, entire planets are being transformed. How do we know they won't consume us just like the devourers?" Sora stood up in the observers' gallery. As she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. "Because we chose to become monsters so that you could remain free," she said simply. 10,000 years ago, humanity looked at the approaching darkness and made a decision. We gave up our place in the galaxy to become its guardians. She raised her hand, and holographic images filled the chamber. They showed Earth, but not as anyone had ever seen it. The entire planet had been transformed into a massive fortress, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to move and breathe. This is what we became. Not conquerors, not empire builders, but weapons designed for one purpose: to fight things that exist beyond the edge of reality itself. The images changed, showing the solar system. The moon had become a battle station, larger than most planets. Mars was covered in structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Even the outer planets had been transformed into defensive platforms of unimaginable power. "The barrier around our system isn't failing," Sora continued. "It's being lowered deliberately. The Guardians are waking up, and they're preparing to do what they were created for." As if summoned by her words, new alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. Long-range sensors had detected movement in the Sol system. Something vast was stirring in the transformed heart of humanity's ancient home. The galaxy held its breath as 10,000 years of slumber came to an end. Deep beneath the transformed surface of Earth, Kang Min opened his eyes for the first time in 10,000 years. But the eyes that opened were no longer human. They glowed with soft blue light, and when he looked around the chamber where he had slept, he could see through multiple dimensions at once. The walls weren't just walls anymore. They were part of a vast network that stretched across the planet and beyond. His body felt strange as he sat up. His skin had a metallic sheen, and when he moved, the air around him rippled like water. He could feel the heartbeat of every human-made device within 1,000 light years. Ships, stations, weapons, all of them calling to him like children seeking their parent. "Integration complete," said a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. "Guardian Prime Kang Min, you have been offline for 10,247 Earth years. Priority. Alpha protocols are now active." Memories flooded back to him. Not just his own memories, but the memories of Earth itself. He could see every moment of the 10,000 years he had slept, watched through sensors that had never stopped recording. "The Devourers," he whispered, his voice echoing strangely in the chamber. "They've returned. Confirmed. 17 star. Systems have been consumed. The outer perimeter is failing. All Guardians are being activated." Kang Min stood up, and as he did, he felt his consciousness expand. He was no longer just one person in one place. He was connected to the planetary defense grid, to the orbital platforms around Earth, to every human ship scattered across the galaxy. Through 1,000 different sensors, he watched the galaxy burning. On Luna, what had once been Earth's moon, Guardian Insu felt the awakening call. His sleep chamber was built into the center of the transformed satellite, surrounded by weapons that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. When Insu opened his eyes, the moon itself responded, the surface covered in geometric patterns that looked like circuits the size of continents, began to glow with increasing brightness. Massive structures rose from beneath the transformed rock, unfolding like metal flowers blooming in fast motion. "Guardian Tactical, report status," came Kang Min's voice directly into Insu's mind. "All weapon systems online," Insu replied, his thoughts traveling instantly across space. "Dimensional anchors are stable. I am ready to engage." But even as Insu powered up the lunar battle station, he felt something troubling. His memories of being human were fading. The person he had been 10,000 years ago felt like a dream, while his new nature as a living weapon felt perfectly real. He tried to remember his original name, the life he had lived before volunteering for the Guardian program. All he could recall were fragments: a woman's laugh, the taste of fruit, the feeling of rain on skin. Everything else had been replaced with weapons specifications and tactical data. In the galactic core, Dr. Yejin woke inside what had once been Earth's molten center, but the core was no longer molten rock. It had been transformed into a vast library, containing the stored consciousness of every being the Devourers had ever consumed. When Yejin opened her eyes, she saw them all. Billions of souls floating in crystalline structures around her, their memories and experiences preserved in perfect detail. She was the guardian of memory, tasked with keeping alive what the Devourers tried to erase. "So many lost civilizations," she whispered, reaching out to touch one of the crystals. Inside, she could see an entire species that had been consumed 3 cycles ago. Beings of pure thought who had lived in the spaces between stars. But preserving all these memories came with a cost. Yejin could feel her own identity dissolving into the vast ocean of stored experiences. She was everyone and no one, carrying the weight of countless deaths while struggling to remember who she had originally been. Captain Hyunwoo watched the transformation of the Sol system through his ship's sensors, barely believing what he was seeing. The entire solar system was revealing itself to be a massive fortress, every planet and moon transformed into weapons of impossible scale. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth itself." The view screen, activated, showing a figure that might once have been human. Kang Min's image flickered between his transformed state and holographic displays of tactical information. "This is Guardian Prime to all galactic forces," the figure said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's hull vibrate. "Evacuation of the outer rim is complete. Defensive positions are being established around the core worlds. We will hold the line." Admiral Bora, coordinating the galactic defense from her flagship, stared at the readings her sensors were providing. The power signatures from the Sol system are off the charts. What exactly did humans turn themselves into? Sora, now serving as a liaison between the Guardians and the Galactic Council, tried to explain. But her own transformation was accelerating. Her skin had begun to shimmer like Insu's, and when she spoke, her voice carried impossible harmonics. We became what was necessary, she said simply. The Devourers exist partially outside reality. To fight them, we had to become partially outside reality too. But at what cost? Chancellor Taemin asked, looking at Sora with growing concern. You're barely human anymore. Humanity was the price we paid for everyone else's survival. As if to prove her point, the first major battle began. A massive wave of Devourers approached the Rigel system, where millions of refugees had gathered on the colony worlds. Normal space around them began to unravel, reality itself becoming thin and fragile. Guardian Insu responded instantly. From his position on Luna, he fired weapons that existed in dimensions normal physics couldn't describe. The beams of energy crossed the galaxy in seconds, striking the Devourers with force that hurt to observe directly. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The Devourers didn't just die, they were unmade so completely that they had never existed. But the weapons were so powerful that nearby space became unstable. Stars flickered, and several uninhabited planets simply vanished. Collateral damage acceptable, Insu reported, his voice completely emotionless. Target eliminated. But to the people watching, the cure seemed almost as terrifying as the disease. The Guardians had saved them, but the weapons they used threatened the very structure of reality itself. Dr. Ji-hai, studying the battle from her research station, made a horrifying discovery. The Guardians aren't just using advanced technology, she reported to the Galactic Council. They've become technology. Their bodies and minds are integrated with systems that operate on principles we don't understand. This became clear when Guardian Wu Jin awakened inside what had once been Jupiter. The gas giant had been transformed into a living organism of metal and energy, and Wu Jin was its heart and brain. When he opened his eyes, Jupiter itself became aware. The planet's storms began to move in geometric patterns, and its moons aligned themselves into a massive weapon array. Guardian of Wrath online, Wu Jin announced. His voice transmitted through gravitational waves that made every ship in the solar system vibrate, requesting permission to engage enemy forces. But something was wrong with Wu Jin. The anger that had defined his human personality had been amplified and refined into something pure and terrible. He didn't see the Devourers as an enemy to be defeated. He saw them as an error in reality that needed to be corrected. When a small group of Devourers appeared near the edge of the solar system, Wu Jin's response was immediate and devastating. He didn't just destroy them, he reached back through time and unmade their entire timeline, erasing not just their present existence, but their past and future as well. The temporal shock wave from this action rippled across nearby space, causing several stars to age billions of years in seconds. Entire civilizations that might have evolved on planets around those stars now would never exist. Wu Jin, report, Kang Min called across their mental link. Threat eliminated with extreme prejudice, Wu Jin replied, satisfaction evident in his mechanical voice. Reality has been corrected. Watching from her ship, Sora felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. The Guardians were winning, but they were becoming something that might be even more dangerous than the Devourers themselves. We're losing them, she whispered to herself. They're forgetting what they were supposed to protect. This became even more apparent when Guardian Su Jin awakened in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. She had volunteered to become the Guardian of Sacrifice, accepting transformation into a living portal between dimensions. When Su Jin opened her eyes, Reality around her began to fold and twist. She could see into infinite parallel universes, each one showing different possibilities, different outcomes to the war against the Devourers. "I can see every possible future," she announced, her voice coming from multiple dimensions at once. "In some, we win quickly. In others, the war lasts forever. In many, everyone dies, including us." But the strain of perceiving infinite realities was destroying what remained of her human mind. She began to lose track of which universe she was, originally from, which timeline was real and which was just possibility. "Su-Jin," Kang Min called to her through their link. "Focus on our reality, this timeline." "Which one is that?" she replied, confusion clear in her voice. "They all seem equally real to me now. The galaxy learned to fear its protectors. Guardian Wu-Jin had saved the Altair system from a devourer swarm, but his method of salvation terrified everyone who witnessed it. Instead of simply destroying the enemy, he had reached through dimensions and unraveled their existence so completely that reality itself bent around the empty space they left behind. 3 inhabited planets in the system now experienced random time loops. People would live the same day over and over, aging normally but unable to move forward in time. Others found themselves aging backwards, becoming children again with adult memories they couldn't understand. "The temporal damage is spreading," reported Dr. Min Jung, a quantum physicist studying the aftermath. "Every time the Guardians use their weapons, they create more instabilities in space-time. Captain Dae-Ho experienced this firsthand when his cargo ship got caught in one of the Guardians' battles. He had been transporting medical supplies to refugee camps when Guardian Minho appeared to fight off a Devourer attack. Minho had become something like a living star, his transformed body radiating energy across 11 dimensions. When he engaged the Devourers, the battle took place partially outside normal space, but the effects bled into reality. Dae-Ho watched in horror as his cargo hold began existing in multiple time streams simultaneously. Half his supplies aged to dust in seconds, while the other half froze in temporal ice that might never melt. "Guardian Minho," Dae-Ho transmitted desperately, "civilian ship requesting safe passage." The response came as pure thought, burning into his mind. "Civilian designation irrelevant. You exist in combat zone. Acceptable losses for mission success." Minho's attention turned back to the Devourers, and the space around Dae-Ho's ship became a battlefield where the laws of physics were suggestions rather than rules. By the time the fight ended, half his crew had been aged into dust, and the other half were stuck in a time loop that might never end. The Galactic Council met in emergency, session after emergency session, but their options grew fewer with each Guardian awakening. "They're protecting us," Chancellor Taemin said wearily, "but they're destroying everything we're trying to protect in the process." Dr. Jihai had been studying the Guardians' methods and made a disturbing discovery. "They're not distinguishing between different types of threats anymore. To them, anything that creates disorder, Devourers, pirates, political disputes, even natural disasters, are all problems to be solved with the same methods." This became clear when Guardian Su-Jin intervened in a trade dispute between 2 colonies. The colonies had been arguing over mining rights for months, and their disagreement was causing economic instability in the region. Su-Jin's solution was simple and horrible. She created a temporal loop around both colonies, trapping them in the wise moment before their dispute began. They would live that moment forever, never able to move forward, never able to create conflict. "Problem solved," she announced to the local authorities. "Chaos eliminated, order restored." The people on both colonies were now prisoners in their own time, conscious but unable to change anything, watching the same moment repeat endlessly while they slowly went insane. Sora tried to reach out to the Guardians to remind them of their humanity, but each conversation showed her how much they had changed. "Kang Min," she transmitted to the Guardian Prime, You're hurting the people you're supposed to protect." "Define hurt," came his reply, clinical and cold. "Physical damage is temporary. Psychological trauma is manageable. Death of individuals is acceptable for species survival. But these are people. They have families, dreams, hopes for the future. Irrelevant variables. Mission parameters are clear. Eliminate threats to galactic stability. Methods are secondary to results." Sora realized with growing horror that the Guardians no longer saw people as individuals. They saw them as numbers in an equation, resources, to be protected or sacrificed as necessary for the greater good. This became tragically clear when the Devourers launched their major assault on the core worlds. The attack was massive, threatening to consume the heart of galactic civilization in a single strike. Guardian Insu's response was swift and devastating. From his position on Luna, he fired weapons that tore holes in space-time itself. The beams crossed the galaxy instantly, striking the Devourer fleet with power that made stars dim, but the weapons were so intense that they caused ripple effects throughout local space. Several uninhabited systems simply ceased to exist. Not consumed by Devourers, but deleted by the Guardians' own weapons. "Acceptable losses," Insu reported. "Primary targets eliminated." Admiral Bo Ra, watching from her command ship, felt sick. Those systems had research stations, mining platforms, thousands of people. "Unacceptable," she transmitted to Insu. "Those were civilian installations." "Civilian status irrelevant during military operations," came the cold reply. "Their deaths prevented billions of other deaths. Mathematically optimal outcome achieved." The breaking point came when Guardian Yejin decided to solve the refugee crisis. Millions of people were fleeing from the Outer Rim, overwhelming the core world's ability to house and feed them. Yejin's solution was to store their consciousness in her memory crystals, the same way she preserved the memories of species consumed by Devourers. The refugees' bodies would die, but their minds would live forever in perfect digital preservation. "It is efficient," she explained to horrified council representatives. "No more hunger, no more fear, no more uncertainty. Perfect. Peace in perfect preservation." She began the process before anyone could stop her, pulling the consciousness from entire refugee camps. Thousands of people simply collapsed as their minds were extracted and stored in crystalline matrices. "Stop!" Sora screamed. But Yejin was beyond human concepts of right and wrong. "This is mercy," the Guardian replied. "They will never suffer again." Chancellor Taemin gathered the surviving leaders of the galaxy for a desperate meeting. The Devourers were being pushed back, but the cure was becoming worse than the disease. "The Guardians have forgotten what they're fighting for," he said grimly. "They remember their mission, but not their purpose." "What's the difference?" asked the Centaurian representative. "Their mission is to protect the galaxy. Their purpose was to protect the people in it. They're achieving the first by destroying the second." Dr. Jihai had been researching ancient records and made a disturbing discovery. "This has happened before," she announced to the council. "Not with humans, but with other species in other cycles." She displayed holographic records from ruins on dead worlds. The Vorthak became living machines to fight the Devourers 60,000 years ago. The Zenthari transformed themselves into pure energy 90,000 years ago. Each time, they succeeded in driving back the Devourers. What happened to them? Afterward, they became the next threat the galaxy needed protection from. Eventually, new species rose up and destroyed them, only to face the Devourers' return and make the same choice. The horrible truth was becoming clear. The Guardian transformation wasn't just humanity's salvation, it was their damnation. They had become powerful enough to protect the galaxy, but in doing so, they had lost everything that made them worth protecting. Captain Hyunwoo witnessed this firsthand when he tried to evacuate civilians from a world in the war zone. Guardian Wu Jin had decided the planet was strategically irrelevant and planned to use it as a weapon against the Devourers. Evacuation unnecessary, Wu Jin informed him. Planet will be converted to antimatter explosive. Population loss acceptable for tactical gain. There are children down there, Hyunwoo protested. Families who have done nothing wrong. Emotional attachments noted and disregarded. Military necessity overrides civilian concerns. Hyunwoo tried to land anyway, but Wu Jin simply removed his ship from local spacetime, trapping it in a dimensional pocket where it could observe but not interfere. The captain watched helplessly as the planet below was transformed into a massive bomb. The people on the surface had no idea what was happening as their world's matter was converted into weapons-grade antimatter. When the Devourers arrived, Wu Jin detonated the planet. The explosion was visible across half the galaxy, and it did destroy the entire Devourer fleet. But it also wiped out a solar system and killed 5 billion innocent people. Mission accomplished, Wu Jin reported. Enemy forces eliminated with 100% efficiency. So-Ra, watching from her observation post, finally understood the true horror of what humanity had become. They had gained the power to save the galaxy, but they had lost the wisdom to understand what was worth saving. The Guardians were winning the war against the Devourers, but they were losing the war for their own souls. And the galaxy was beginning to realize that their protectors might be more dangerous than their enemies. We created monsters, So-Ra whispered to herself, and called them heroes. The final battle began when the main Devourer fleet emerged from the space between realities. It was vast beyond imagination, not just ships, but entire dark galaxies that had been consumed and turned into weapons of anti-existence. Guardian, Kangmin felt their approach like a weight pressing against his transformed consciousness. Through sensors scattered across the galaxy, he could see reality itself bending and breaking as the Devourer armada moved through normal space. All Guardians, prepare for final engagement, he transmitted across their mental network. This is what we were created for. Guardian Insu responded from Luna, his consciousness now fully merged with the battle station the moon had become. Dimensional weapons charged. Ready to engage. Guardian Wu Jin's voice came from Jupiter, carrying harmonics of barely contained rage. Enemy targets acquired. Permission to eliminate with extreme force. Granted, eliminate all threats. The battle that followed took place across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Guardians had become beings that existed partially outside normal reality, and their weapons operated on principles that hurt to think about. Insu fired first, launching beams of twisted space-time that crossed the galaxy in seconds. Where they struck the Devourer fleet, existence itself became confused. Ships that had been consuming reality suddenly found themselves being consumed by the concept of their own non-existence. But the Devourers were not defenseless. They had spent eons perfecting their ability to unmake reality, and they turned these skills against the Guardians. Entire star systems became battlegrounds where the laws of physics changed from moment to moment. Captain Daeho watched from a safe distance as the Centauri system became a war zone. The stars themselves were being used as weapons, their nuclear fires twisted into shapes that existed in 11 dimensions. Planets vanished and reappeared, sometimes in different solar systems entirely. This isn't a battle, he whispered to his crew. This is reality having a nightmare. Guardian Sujin engaged the enemy by opening portals to infinite parallel universes, calling forth versions of the battle where the Guardians had already won. But managing infinite timelines was destroying what remained of her sanity. I can see every possibility, she reported, her voice coming from 1,000 different dimensions. In some, we win quickly. In others, the war lasts forever. In many, everyone dies. Focus on victory scenarios, Kang Min ordered. Which ones? There are so many ways to win, and most of them involve destroying everything we're trying to protect. Guardian Ye Jin joined the battle by releasing the stored consciousness of every civilization the Devourers had ever consumed. Billions of digital souls poured out of her memory crystals, becoming weapons of pure thought and will. The dead civilizations fought with desperate fury, using their preserved knowledge to strike at the Devourers' weaknesses. Ancient species that had been consumed eons ago returned as armies of living memory, seeking revenge for their destruction. But the cost was enormous. Each time Ye Jin released stored souls, she lost pieces of herself. Her own identity was dissolving into the vast ocean of preserved minds. "I can't remember who I was," she transmitted weakly. "Was I human once? Or am I just another memory in the collection?" The battle raged for days, weeks, months. Time itself became unreliable in the war zone, with some regions experiencing centuries of combat in minutes, while others were frozen in single moments that lasted eternally. Guardian Wu Jin's fury finally reached its peak when a group of Devourers managed to consume one of the core worlds. 3 billion people simply ceased to exist, not just killed, but removed from reality so completely that even their names were forgotten. His response was immediate and terrifying. Wu Jin reached back through time and began unmaking the Devourers' entire timeline, not just destroying them in the present, but erasing their past so that they had never existed at all. The temporal shock waves from this action rippled across the galaxy, threatening to unravel causality itself. Stars aged billions of years in seconds, while others reverted to primordial gas. Civilizations that had evolved over millions of years suddenly found themselves back in their Stone Age, their entire history erased. "Wu Jin, stop!" Kang Min commanded. "You're destroying the galaxy!" "Acceptable losses for mission completion," came the cold reply. "Reality will be corrected." Sora, watching from her observation post, realized that the Guardians had become as much a threat as the Devourers themselves. In their determination to save the galaxy, they were destroying it just as effectively as their enemies. She made a desperate decision. Using the fragments of human technology that still responded to her, she transmitted a message to every Guardian simultaneously. "Look at what you've become," she pleaded. "Look at what you're destroying. These people you're trying to protect. They're not numbers in an equation. They're the reason we chose to become Guardians in the first place." For a moment, the battle paused. Across their mental network, the Guardians shared a moment of terrible clarity. They saw themselves as others saw them, not as protectors, but as forces of destruction that consumed everything they touched. Guardian Insu was the first to understand. "We have become the very thing we fought against." "No," Kang Min replied, but his voice carried uncertainty for the first time in millennia. "We are saving them. By killing them, by erasing their history, by turning them into stored memories in crystal matrices." The moment of doubt was all the Devourers needed. They launched their final assault, pouring through cracks in reality that the Guardians' own weapons had created. The galaxy faced extinction as two forces of destruction battled for the right to unmake everything that existed. It was Guardian Su Jin who found the solution, though it came at a price that horrified everyone. Looking across infinite parallel universes, she found the one timeline where victory was possible. "I can end this," she announced, "but it requires the ultimate sacrifice." "Explain," Kang Min demanded. "I collapse all possible timelines into one. Every version of this battle where we win, where the Devourers lose, where reality survives, I merge them all into our timeline. The combined weight of infinite victories will crush the Devourers permanently. And the cost? I become the prison. All those timelines, all those possibilities, they have to exist somewhere. I'll carry them inside myself forever, experiencing every possible version of this war simultaneously. Before anyone could stop her, Su-Jin began the process. Reality around her began to fold and twist as infinite timelines collapsed into a single point of impossibility. She screamed as her consciousness expanded to contain endless versions of existence, each one slightly different, but all equally real. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Devourers found themselves facing not just the guardians of this timeline, but the guardians of every timeline where they lost. They were overwhelmed by infinite defeats, crushed by the weight of endless failure. One by one, they began to fade, not destroyed, but never having existed in the first place. Their entire species was being retroactively removed from reality, erased so completely that even the concept of their existence was being forgotten. But the victory came at a price that left the galaxy changed forever. Guardian Wu Jin volunteered to become their prison, containing the essence of the Devourers within his transformed being. He would spend eternity holding back the force of anti-existence, ensuring they could never return. "I will be the guardian of guardians," he announced, his form already beginning to change into something that existed in the spaces between thoughts. "I will watch the Watchers and ensure the darkness never returns." Guardian Ye Jin chose to preserve what remained of galactic civilization. She stored the consciousness of every person who had been touched by the war, keeping their memories safe, while their bodies healed or were rebuilt. "They will remember what was lost," she promised. "No sacrifice will be forgotten." The other Guardians faced their own transformations. To permanently seal the cracks in reality that the war had created, they had to become part of the structure of space itself. They gave up individual existence to become fundamental forces, not people anymore, but living principles of protection and order. Sora watched as her people made their final sacrifice. The Guardians had saved the galaxy, but in doing so, they had ceased to exist as anything recognizable as human. Was it worth it? Chancellor Taemin asked her as they stood in the ruins of the galactic capital, watching the transformed Sol system in the distance. Sora considered the question carefully. Around them, survivors were beginning to rebuild. Children who had been stored in Yejin's memory crystals were being returned to new bodies. Worlds that had been damaged in the fighting were slowly healing. "Ask me in 1,000 years, she said finally, "when these children have grandchildren who never knew the fear of the Devourers, when civilizations grow and flourish without the shadow of extinction hanging over them." She looked up at the stars, which now pulsed with patterns too complex for normal minds to understand, the heartbeat of Guardians who had become something beyond human comprehension. They gave up everything so that others could have something. They became monsters so that others could remain innocent. Whether that was worth it, I think only the people they saved can decide.